Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the September the 11th meeting of the HOC Commission. And I'm Roy Priest. I'm the chair of the commission. I am joined today by my fellow commissioners. On to my immediate left, Jeffrey Merkowitz who is our vice chair. To his left is Linda Kroom, commissioner. To my right is Chair Pro Tem Robin Solomon. And on remotely joining us is Pamela Bird. So this is our first meeting of having 1 month off for the month of August, which we were grateful for. And the reward is we've got a long agenda for the month of September. So I want to welcome you. Also, I want to welcome those of you who are joining us by Zoom. We have an agenda before us. Are there any changes or modifications to the agenda? If not, can we adopt the agenda for the meeting? We will move forward then as outlined. We don't have anyone who's asked to sign up for the community forum today, so we will move immediately to the report of the president. And I'll turn to President Andrews.
Thank you, commissioners. It's great to see you again. I'm pleased to share updates as it pertains to the work that we engaged in the month of August. Next slide. You'll hear today exciting developments as it pertains to our customers and our communities and how we've engaged, updates related to our resident services division, housing resources division, the real estate division, as well as mortgage finance. Next slide. Really excited to share that this year we continued our annual back to school STEM fair and served over 500 county residents in partnership with Montgomery Parks and Rec. And we're able to distribute over 500 free backpacks to students. We also started a new initiative amongst our own team, and that's the Helping Our Communities initiative. It's a staff-led volunteer initiative where our staff are assigned on cross-functional teams, that means cross-divisional teams, and have adopted a property. They create an event and ultimately deliver and connect with our residents more meaningfully. We've kicked that off, and it has been a wonderful initiative, a service initiative that has been both satisfying and fulfilling for staff, but also for our residents. And so you see some photos from the first event. There are 10 events that are scheduled to occur over the course of this year. Next slide. We also had a lot of activities in the summer months as it pertains to fire prevention, protecting our seniors, as well as raising awareness around crime prevention and connecting positively with our officers that support our properties. Of note, the National Night Out occurred at Cider Mill Apartments, Washington Square, Camp Hill, as well as Tanglewood Apartments, and you see photos there. Next slide. We continue to work in partnership with the county as it pertains to providing Chromebook laptop distribution at various sites. We, over the course of the month of August, conducted this activity at over 9 properties. And you see them highlighted in terms of the dates and the locations. But this has been a huge undertaking and a great benefit to our seniors and our residents. Next slide. Again, in terms of partnerships and how they matter, you see that Montgomery County Department of Rec this summer hosted a food, fun, and fitness camp for our kids at Cider Mill Apartments. It was for 1st through 8th grade students, and it was a wonderful engagement. As you can see, there's photos there, as well as our ongoing work and partnership with Arts for the Aging across our senior portfolio. We continue to have ongoing resources for our seniors and our residents that are highlighted on this slide as well. Next slide. Again, there are multiple resources that are provided to our seniors and activities, bingo, as well as field trips. And you see where we cite the various field trips that took place over the summer. And this actually reflects both July and August, as well as our partners in terms of hosting social activities and events to keep our seniors engaged. Next slide. We also continue our partnership with multiple nonprofits that help to ensure that our seniors have food to address any food insecurities. And you see photos from the Fenton property in Silver Spring. Next slide. Our Resident Services Division has a housing stabilization team. There were 59 customers that were served during this time, and we were able to ensure that these residents had proper referrals for rent, utilities, et cetera. And you also see that we continue to host financial literacy workshops and many other workshops as referenced on the slide. Next slide. This is just highlighting even more the success, and I want to just acknowledge and thank the HOC team, the resident services team, and all of our other employees that volunteered for this really successful event where we were able to distribute multiple backpacks to over 550 children and produce and have STEM activities for them as well. Next slide. You see that HOC Academy continues to engage. There is a trend here. Everyone loves iFly, but it's more than that. There's also the educational component that is tied to the work that we do. And you see the partnership with the University of Maryland Chemistry Department and others, where we take opportunities to teach our children about STEM and other enrichment opportunities. Next slide. We highlight the partnership and the work that we do in regards to our academy and cross community to facilitate a 3-day STEAM infused summer program that happened both at Washington Square and Stewart Town Homes. And then also, I just want to continue to thank and appreciate the Tacey Foundation, who provides our students and kids at Tanglewood Apartments with summer piano pals programming. Next slide. You see that we're highlighting additional support in terms of teaching our young people in terms of how to prepare to pay for their education, as well, and also our adults who receive tuition assistance, and then also encouraging career growth through a Dare to Dream and Esteem program that was hosted at Tanglewood Apartments this summer. Next slide. Our fatherhood initiative continues recruiting and graduating participants, and we spotlight that there were 12 graduates and 15 new participants over the summer. And we also continue to provide supportive housing, case management, wraparound services to over 380 participants. Next slide. Our voucher program utilization rate is still strong. It's at 97.5%. There was a slight decline, but it is tied to the fact that we received additional vouchers. And so as we continue to lease up those households, we fully expect that our utilization rate will go back to our 98% or above. You see here where we've identified the number of people that we have reached out to over the course of the summer, as well as the people who are currently searching for homes. Next slide. In terms of Rent Cafe, we still have strong participation. We're going to continue to advance and advocate for people to take advantage of that resource. There were 99 customers that were recommended for termination. However, 75 were able to be assisted with our resident services team. And you see the 24 families that we are still moving forward with the basis for moving forward. However, we continue to try to reach out to those that we're unable to reach and are open to supporting them. Next slide. Our family self-sufficiency program recruitment is heavily underway and was during the summer as well. We currently have 332 participants, 8 new enrollments, and 1 new graduate. And in terms of recruiting efforts, the FSS program is really thinking creatively on how to bring in even more customers. And you see highlighted the various programs and activities that they went to recruit additional participants. Next slide. I want to just spotlight and acknowledge that we do have a new senior leader, Nihar Shah. He joined our team. He is the vice president of development and real estate, and works hand in hand with our senior vice president, Zachary Marks. I'm certain he will be before you any day now with advancing our development pipeline and continuing to support our efforts. Next slide. Mortgage finance update. Our mortgage finance team also is doing a lot of great work in terms of making sure that all folks across this county, but in particular professionals that are in the realm of being able to make referrals to our home ownership program are apprised of what we have to offer. In July, they did a presentation with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and that was a successful event. And then we also opened on August 12th our 7th round of McAF funding, and that is the down payment assistance and closing cost funding that we administer on behalf of the county. Next slide. And although this is happening in the month of September and not August, I could not hold back in terms of sharing that we are extraordinarily excited that we will be breaking ground at our Lumina and Radia at Hillendale Gateway here on September 18th. We're extraordinarily proud of this project, and it has come to a time for us to celebrate. So just wanted to acknowledge more details and photos in regards to this grand opening will be shared in the next president report. Next slide. And with that, I will say thank you. I do want to just also acknowledge that we do not have the RAB in today's meeting because they're getting geared back up here this month. So it's our expectation that after they have their first meeting, they will come back with their standard report out and be a part of our agenda in our meetings moving forward as well. And with that, I open for any questions and/or comments. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed with the rest of the agenda, I think it certainly is appropriate because we do happen to be having our meeting today on September the 11th, which is a very significant day in the history of this country in terms of the fact that we're commemorating those who lost their lives from the disaster that occurred on September the 11th, almost 23 years ago. Today, there were a lot of commemorative programs and ceremonies in New York, at the Pentagon, and also in Pennsylvania. And I just thought we would take a moment of silence just to remember those who lost their lives, especially first responders and others. Take a moment of just silence. Thank you all. We are in the people business, and so it's important for us to remember those who have, in fact, committed themselves to the same kind of work we do around public service and giving back to others. I want to take a moment also to acknowledge the fact that we're starting our September meeting with one of our commissioners who has served on our commission for 6 years, Fran Kelleher. Her term ended on August the 31st, and I just want to acknowledge Fran's service for 6 years that she gave to HOC. I wanted to do a big party, but that's not how everybody wants to do these kinds of things. And so with that, I respect her willingness, her desire to want to say thank you. And so we want to say thank you back to her. So with that, I'll thank you. I also want to encourage fellow commissioners that hopefully we can all try to attend the 18th groundbreaking for Hillendale. It's going to be a very significant monumental project. So to the extent that you can get there, please try to do so. So any other information exchange between commissioners?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, fellow commissioners, President Andrews, and staff. I had the pleasure to go to a training session with Nell Rod's summer session for the first time on August 7th through the 9th, 2024. It took place in Cleveland, Ohio. There was plenty of classes to sign up for, but I decided to attend the commissioners' classes, which consisted of the following classes: the board and the agency, building an effective partnership, PHA, operational reports, basis of public housing financials, capital funding, program, and even scoring related to financial management. We even had a private reception that Thursday, 'Thursday, 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 Have anybody been there? Upon completion of all the training sessions, I received a certificate of completion for the Commissioners Workshop. These seminar sessions was quite informative, and I was very happy to have attended. Thank you. Thank you, Amani, for helping me out. Thank you for going. Oh, and here's my certificate. I've been busy this month, last month. I didn't come. And this is the one I had to take for Narrow. So I did that.
Okay, ethics.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. I certainly encourage those kinds of trainings. I know we usually go to, when it's possible, to NIVO training because they have a good commissioner curriculum that they do with their training. So again, thank you for going. And we give you more work to do.
No.
Okay, with that, anything else? If not, I'll move the agenda to the approval of minutes. These are the minutes of July 10th, 2024 for open session and also a closed session for the same July 10th date.
So moved.
Got a second?
Second.
Probably moving second to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered, carried unanimously. We'll now go into the consent portion of the agenda. We have 3 items that are before us for the consent agenda, dealing all with our collective bargaining agreement. This is discussion that we have had, presentations have been made to us by our president in this matter. And so that's why it's been put on a consent agenda for our review and approval. I think we can approve all of these collectively. We'll have to do them individually. So could I get a motion to approve the 3 consent items that are on the agenda? Motion has been made. We have a second. Probably moved and second to approve the consent items. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered, carried unanimously. We will now go into our committee reports. The first committee report is Budget and Finance Committee that I am currently serving as the chair of. There is only one item before the committee for that purpose. This is the item dealing with the county's fiscal year capital budget in terms of amending the CIP amendment for 25 to 30. So with that, I'll turn to President Andrews.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just share, and I always want to start when we're advancing a request to the county by really acknowledging and appreciating the partnership of the county for the many years it has supported HOC. In this particular request, we're focused solely on capital improvements, and you will note that we are requesting that the county continue to support the projects that it has previously identified as supporting, and there are 2 additional asks, one related to additional support requested for Elizabeth House demolition. We've shared with the commission in terms of how the costs went up on that demolition to ensure that we are demolishing in an environmentally safe manner. And then secondly, you will note, and we raised this at our BF&A committee meeting, a request from the county to partner with us and support us for cider mill security and health and safety expenditures. And so we are advancing a request to the county to provide $2.3 million worth of support. This is a win-win scenario. Crime has gone down significantly at cider mill. And in terms of partnering and supporting our fellow county police officers, the security cameras that have been installed have received rave reviews. They've asked us on multiple occasions to utilize our technology to help solve, and it has helped solve crime in the area. And it has been a successful and positive resource for us as well as the county. And so we believe that we will hopefully receive the support of the council. I will turn it over to our finance team. I believe, generally speaking, I've given the high level overview, but turn it over to the finance team if there are any additional points that should be raised.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, President Andrews, and the viewing public and staff. I think it has been presented. This is an amendment year, and during amendment years, you can request amendments that are related to health and safety. The items we are requesting for cider mill are specifically related to the health and safety of our residents there. And we just, again, thank the county for their continued support and look forward to the partnership. I'm happy to address any questions you may have, but I do think that the level of detail that was provided gives you the bullets.
Yeah, I will say this item was presented to the committee and we recommended it forward to the full commission for approval. And these items do fit clearly within our priorities of things we want to do on our specific properties for capital projects. So committee supports the staff recommendation to approve this item, which is resolution number 44-54.
I would make a motion then that we approve the resolution.
Been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution
24,
24-54.
65.
I'm looking at. What's page?
Oh, those are pages.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. You have a motion to approve them
Yes.
and seconded.
And I said,
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered.
Thank you.
There's no other items on the Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you very much. We want to now turn to our Development Finance Committee that's chaired by Commissioner Merkowitz.
Thank you. So the first item that came before this committee has to do with the limited partner interest in our Forest Oak Towers and the assignment of that interest. And I will turn it over to President Andrews.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, this is an item, along with many of the items here today, that was fully briefed at committee level. And the presentation and materials are, of course, incorporated in this packet and available for the public's consumption. In this request, it's a pretty straightforward one. We are seeking support and approval to assign the ownership interest to HOC. This is a property that is located in Gaithersburg. It supports and serves our seniors. It's 175 units. It's senior and it's 100% affordable. So we're really pleased to have this asset in our portfolio and would like to take the next steps of full ownership. I'll turn it over to our asset manager, Aaron Smith, to provide high-level updates here and hope for swift support.
Hi, I'll introduce the matter at hand. John Wilhoit, Vice President, Asset Management. Aaron will be presenting on the exit of the LITech investor for this property. The presentation is for Forest Oak Towers, approval of assignment of Forest Oak Towers Limited Partnership Interest to HOC Year 15 LLC and approval of HOC Year 15 LLC of the assumption of the limited partnership interest. And this will be presented by Aaron Smith.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Aaron Smith, for the record, Aaron Smith, Asset Manager. Forest Oak Towers is 175 unit, 10-story housing community built in 1981, located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, adjacent to the Lake Forest Mall. The property stands to benefit from the proposed mall redevelopment. All units are income restricted and supported by project-based rental assistance. The ownership structure, HOC formed Forest Oak Limited Partnership in 2009 to acquire and renovate property, leveraging LITech equity and tax exempt bonds. HOC holds a 0.01 general partnership interest, while PNC holds 99.9% limited partnership interest. Columbia Housing SLP Corporation serves as the special limited partner with 0% interest. The compliance period expiration, the 15-year compliance period ended on December 31st, 2022. In response, PNC and PNC SLP wish to assign their partnership interest to HOC Year 15 LLC for $100,305. This sum includes $12,837 in investor services fees for 2023, the prorated ISF fee for $9,917 through September 30th, 2024, and the $71,552 for taxable gain payment owed to PNC. The post-transfer strategy Upon assignment of these interests, HOC will fully own Forest Oak LP and control Forest Oak Towers. HOC plans to place a property in a renovation pipeline, potentially using LIHTC financing. Renovations would include both interior and exterior upgrades to improve marketability and system reinvestments to extend the building's lifespan. Next slide, please. This slide depicts property information details, including unit mix of the property. I would like to point out the property has 175 one-bedroom units and 10 two-bedroom units, 84 parking spaces. The building is age restricted, 62 plus years of age. And the average rents are for one bedroom or $1,560 and $1,875 for two bedroom. Next slide, please. This slide details property financial data for calendar year 2021, calendar year 2022, calendar year 2023. An item to note is the current and future CapEx of $540,100 for calendar year 24 and $168,824 for calendar year 25. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the investor exit summary. PNC and PNC SLP have offered to assign their interest in Forest Oak LP to HOC Year 15 LLC, and for all the amounts to PNC are paid. The amounts owed to PNC are one, outstanding investor services fee, ISF accrual that I noted in the previous slide for 2023 and 2024, a taxable gain payment for PNC in 2023, and legal costs related to the transfer. Next slide, please. This slide shows the current ownership interest in the change in ownership transfer to HOC. From HOC being the general partner with 0.01% stake, while PNC owns 99.9% currently. And after the assignment, Forest Oak will be wholly owned by HOC. Next slide, please. The first step in the ILP transfer assignment is to finalize the interest in the ILP, securing 100% ownership of the asset. Once ownership is fully acquired, the next priority is to obtain the physical needs assessment, capital needs assessment to evaluate the asset's capital requirements. This assessment will provide critical insights into the necessary investments needed to maintain or improve the property. Following this, the real estate development team anticipates the redevelopment phase will commence in the latter half of the calendar year 2025. These steps will ensure a smooth transition and set a stage for the planned redevelopment. Next slide, please. Issues for consideration. Does the commission support the staff's recommendation to approve the assignment of PNC's limited partnership interest and PNC SLP's special limited partnership interest in Forest Oak Tower limited partnership to HOC Year 15 Year LLC? Approve HOC Year 15 Year LLC, assuming the limited partnership interest and special limited partnership interest in Forest Oak Towers limited partnership. And lastly, approve HOC Year 15 Year LLC use of excess operating cash to purchase the partnership interest from PNC SLP for the amount equal to $100,305. Please note that there's no immediate impact to the commission's budget, as the payment will be financed using property's excess operating cash. Thank you. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? No. And I will just note that as with the budget item, this was fully discussed in committee and recommended for approval. And with that, I will make a motion that we approve resolution 24-66.
Commissioner Byrd, I second it.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-66. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so ordered, carried unanimously.
Right. The next item on our agenda has to do with bond financing for our housing production fund.
Thank you. Commissioners, we continue to be proud of our Housing Production Fund and have been able to demonstrate how we are able to leverage this resource effectively and be good stewards. We're at the stage where we'd like to move forward with the next tranche of $50 million. And I will turn it over to our Vice President of Mortgage Finance, Michael Somerville, to provide further explanation. This is also a matter that came before the committee in full deliberation and discussion.
Great. Thank you, President Andrews. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, I am Michael Somerville. I'm the Vice President of Mortgage Finance at HOC. I am requesting Commission approval for resolutions, both authorizing and series resolutions, and the cost of an issuance budget to provide funding for the revolving Housing Production Fund. The Housing Production Fund was established in March of 2021 by the County Council, and on August 17th of 2021, the issuance of the first amount of 50 million was closed. Those funds have been fully dispersed to support the Laureate and Hillendale Gateway projects. On May 26th of 2022, the County Council approved a budget appropriation to support the issuance of an additional 50 million in bonds to fund HPF. I'm here and HOC staff seeks Commission's approval for the following: approval of an authorizing resolution, approval of the series resolution, and the cost of issuance budget for the next HPF issuance. If we could advance to page 10 of the presentation, please. So here's the cost of issuance budget, $620,000. It is slightly higher than was the cost of issuance back in 2021, just due to the change in the economic environment, but nothing substantially out of line as expected in our discussions with our financial advisor. And if we could go to page 12, please. So this is the projected timeline, and I wanted to point out a few things. These are all the kind of the key activities that will occur over the next few months. And the reason for the issuance of the bonds in December, even though we're not projecting to use the financing during the remaining portion of the year, is due to a projected volume of issuances in the calendar year in February of next year. So we're trying to take advantage of a situation where we should be able to get competitive pricing. In addition, the timeline reflects the additional time required for the county's due diligence process, which will require HOC working with the county's financial advisor, bond counsel, and rating agency to achieve this closing timeline. And if we could go to page 13, please. So what we're seeking the approval is, again, the authorizing resolution to facilitate the bonds, the series resolution, which actually documents all the details of the actual bond issuance, and then the cost of issuance. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have, or the commission may have, excuse me.
Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions, but a comment. I mean, I think that the Housing Production Fund has certainly been a very exemplar financing tool for HOC in the county. We've gotten a number, as you at the staff and you all know, and the commissioner knows as well, a lot of signature awards because of the structure of this. And I think a lot of people across the country want to imitate. Imitation is, they say, the best form of flattery. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that this has done great work, and we hope that maybe we'll continue to be able to use and have another issuance next year, continue to grow this fund. Be very significant.
Yeah.
So I certainly support this recommendation.
Absolutely.
And I will make a motion to approve it. We probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-67. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay, so ordered.
Thank you.
Commissioner Priest, there's two resolutions. There's also 2467A,
A and B,
just A.
okay.
I'll make a motion to approve 2467A.
Okay. It's been probably moved in to approve resolution 24-67A. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So ordered. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda has to do with the use of some space at our planned future headquarters, which we're all very enthusiastic about as well.
Absolutely, commissioners, and this also came before committee. I just want to share, first of all, the excitement around the development of our HQ. If you have not driven by, please do so. Construction is well underway. The crane is high, and I think we're almost on floor 2 now. So we're moving at rapid pace and really excited about our new headquarters. I want to just pause. The reason why this presentation is coming before the commission and came before the committee was as we continue to think about the best use of our property in our headquarters, we wanted an opportunity to reimagine what the first floor could potentially provide, not only to the surrounding area, but also to our employees. As I shared previously, and as you all know, where this particular parcel is located is tucked away in a part of Silver Spring that does not have a lot of retail, doesn't have a nearby walk to coffee shop, sandwich shop or other. And across the street is our brand new Leggett, the Alexander House, as well as now the South County Aquatic and Recreational Center. And we have the benefit of having a parcel, a property that is a customer service center also in downtown Silver Spring at 880 Bonifit. It is actually one of our most highly utilized spaces for customer engagement. And I asked the team, and the team has done a fantastic job, and you can see in terms of the comprehensive materials provided in exploring the potential of repurposing our first floor or portion of the first floor for retail, allowing us to ensure that we have amenities for our employees as we seek to be a best place to work, and take advantage of a potential revenue stream, as well as leverage our current customer service center, which is a office space that would be difficult to dispose of in this current market, to allow it to continue to serve as a customer service center, but to amplify it and really recreate and imagine it as an enrichment center where people who come in to seek support, drop off information, etc., can also take advantage of classes, financial literacy, workforce development opportunities, etc. And so we have proposed a plan that was supported by Development and Finance Committee that we are very happy to advance here to commission. I will turn it over to Jay Shepard, our housing acquisition manager, who's been leading this project, to provide any additional details. Thank you.
Thank you, President Andrews, and good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, I'm Jay Shepard, Housing Acquisition Manager in Real Estate Development. And as President Andrews stated, I'll just add a couple brief items. One, this item seeks to revise the final development plan that was approved in July 2023 under Resolution 23-45. This revision would modify that plan and would allow commercial retail use on the front half of the first floor of the new building. I'll also point out that staff reviewed both the mandatory referral guidelines, which the entitlements of this building were approved under, as well as the building's financing guidelines, and determined that the use of this space does not conflict with either of those mechanisms. And as President Andrews mentioned, we did an extensive review of the asset at 880 Bonifant, which is a Silver Spring Service Center, and how that could be repurposed or continued to be enhancing HOC's mission. We looked at our updated hybrid work plans and how that fits with our overall administrative assets. And all of those kind of came in line with this recommendation. So staff hereby requests amendment to the final development plan for HOC's new headquarter building, allowing commercial retail use on the ground floor, and our required authorization to pursue and secure amendment to the approved mandatory referral for the allowance of that retail. And thank you very much, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? If not, I will make a motion that we approve Resolution 24-68.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 2468. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How long before we'll be able to get a sandwich?
Well, now that we've gotten that green light, I think whoever takes this opportunity will be well positioned in the market for sure.
The next item on the agenda, we are finished with our committee reports, and we will move now to deliberations and actions. There are two of those that are coming before the commission. One of them deals with the rent stabilization and voluntary rent guidelines, and the second deals with the audits for our LIHTC projects that are required audits that have to be done on a calendar year basis. The first item will be an overview of rent stabilization and voluntary guidelines. This subject matter came before the commission in some discussion earlier, and several commissioners raised questions that were directed to the staff related to the impact of voluntary rent guidelines on our income and revenue structures for last year. The staff is still deliberating on those items, and they will be brought back separately. This item today is to really outline the rent stabilization and the voluntary rent guidelines that have been proposed in modifications by the county and to us as a commission, so that we can determine that we want to proceed in one way as proposed by the staff. And so that is how we're going to proceed in the discussion today about that subject. So I want to just make that point for the record. And so with that, I will turn it to you, President Andrews, for discussion.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, as we shared prior to the break, the county was exploring and has since adopted a rent stabilization regulations. And we wanted an opportunity to present to you an informed education opportunity to share with you some of the nuances of this new law and how it applies to us, share how we have done some analysis in regards to the benefits of applying rent stabilization or VRG for the properties that do not fall within one of those categories. And so today's presentation will be informative. We'll take our time and try to walk you through. I will just share that the law is quite complicated and there are some nuances. So Ken will walk us through the policy ramifications, and then we'll also have some information and insight in regards to our analysis and recommendation in terms of how we apply this moving forward. I'll turn it over to Ken, who supported, and this was a cross-functional effort. You see colleagues not only from our legislative office, but also property management, asset management, and real estate, who all work together in evaluating the rent stabilization law as well as VRG and the impact on our portfolio.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good evening, Commissioners. Ken Silverman, Vice President of Government Affairs. Definitely want to emphasize that this was really a team effort to put this together for you. So I think this item may not be quite as fast as some of the other ones you've gone through tonight, since there are definitely some complications here, but going to try to both keep it moving and hopefully have a chance to leave with a good understanding of the new rules. So thought we could start just by actually going back and looking at where the VRG came from, which is a term that we've been using for a while. The county does have this voluntary rent guideline that they issue every year. This came out of in the 1970s, the last big period of high inflation. There was what I understand to be sort of nationwide a wave of rent control measures that were put in place to protect tenants from potentially really severe rent increases. And as that inflation subsided, local governments grappled with how to remove those. And in Montgomery County, that was done between 1979 and 1981. And in place of the strict rent controls, there was created a package of tenant protections, which was really the beginning of sort of DHCA, as we know it today. And one of those protections was the establishment of a voluntary rent guideline, where the county collects information from landlords and publishes an annual guideline for what they think is a fair increase for for rental housing. That many of those provisions have been, amended over the years. At some point, the calculation for the VRG was specified in the law as the increase of the rent component for the consumer price index for all urban consumers, called CPIU, in the Washington metropolitan area. While the VRG is generally voluntary, the county does require adherence to the VRG through most agreements that they attach to either HIP loans, pilots, other rental agreements. So pretty much any affordable unit that has some kind of county money in it, they generally will include a condition that those increases abide by the VRG for renewals. Next slide, please. So here you can see how the VRG has, tracked inflation over the last 40 years. And then really since its creation, as far as we've been able to tell, HOC has followed a broad policy of applying the VRG as a sort of limit to its rent increases for renewals, not just for affordable units, but to all units, regardless of income. But when units become vacant, HOC has the opportunity to assess the broader market and potentially make larger adjustments so that, even if we've limited the impact on existing tenants by limiting rent increases to that inflationary level, when there's turnover, there's the opportunity to reset the rents and make sure that we're not foregoing, so much revenue that the properties can't operate properly. Why don't I pause there and ask if there's any questions or more detail commissioners would like about the VRG, and then the next slide we'll talk about the new rent stabilization law. Okay, so next slide, please. So in 2023, as you know, the council adopted Bill 1523. It didn't take effect until the council approved the regulations in July of 24. The key provisions are that rent increases are capped, and this is mandatory for all units in the county with some major exemptions, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the rent cap is set at CPIU, and just to make things nice and easy, it's a slightly different calculation than the VRG. So this is the overall CPIU, not just the rent component. So it tracks the broader inflation for the Washington metro region and not just the inflation in rents. It's CPI for all urban consumers in the Washington metropolitan region. Why it's called that, I actually don't, a research project for another time. And then, so it's that CPIU plus 3%, up to a maximum of 6%. So generally speaking, the rent cap under rent stabilization will be about 3% higher than the VRG, up to 6%. So if inflation was 5% 1 year, then you'd have a 1% gap there. Landlords can apply to DHCA for larger increases. 2 examples: you can file a fair return petition, where you can provide data showing that the increase that's allowed under the rent cap, based on your operational, you have to really open your books and provide a great deal of data, and show that you're not, that 6% increase is not providing you with a 3% return. And if you can do that, then DHCA is supposed to approve a higher increase for you that year. An alternate path is a capital surcharge, which would be kind of like a temporary assessment. So we have, you have a large capital project at a building, and then you say, we want to assess a 2% surcharge for the next 5 years to help offset the cost of this capital.
It's 3% of what?
Sorry, so the rent cap in any given year would be
the 3% return.
So that 3% above CPI is supposed to account for, the return that the property owner is making on their property.
You're not saying.
And so the way the fair return petition is set up, is if you can demonstrate that that rent cap doesn't allow you to make a 3% return
Return
on your investment. And there's a quite complicated calculation in the law with,
we'll talk later.
you know, unfortunately, like pages of, you know, what expenses count, what don't count, how to calculate.
We'll talk later.
Yep.
Thanks.
So, and then the capital surcharge would be this sort of temporary, I'm going to add 2% for 5 years
Same calculation.
to the same calculation. Both of those would have to be approved by DHCA. The rent cap applies for renewals and for vacancies. So that control, you know, if you have a vacant unit that turns over and a new tenant, you're still bound by the rent that you were charging the previous year, and your increases has that 6% max. You know, there is a provision for rent banking. So if you choose to go below the cap, you can bank that delta. So if the cap is 6% and you choose to raise the rent 3%, then you have a 3% banked, which you can use in a future year. But you have a maximum increase of 10% in any given year. So you can bank rents, but you're, you know, if you have a vacant unit and you want to increase rents more, you're still capped at 10% for any given increase. And then the final element is that final element that we really wanted to highlight is that there is a provision that properties that are classified as troubled or at risk based on the pre-existing county inspection regime that was created several years ago are frozen. So the properties that are classified that way cannot raise rents at all until they are reclassified as compliant. With the exception being that those properties are allowed to file a fair return petition. So they can, if they can show that, you know, they do need an increase to help cover the necessary repairs that they need to make, and to make a fair return on the property, to cover to be able to finance those repairs, then DHCA should approve that increase. So
Question.
that's a lot. Yeah.
On the, if a landlord was asking for an amount, the adjustment, the exception, that's an annual thing. You have to do it every year.
Yeah, you would have to make that request every year. And you know, presumably if you have created a baseline where, you know, your numbers haven't changed that much from year to year, and it was approved in year one, you could expect that the similar request would be approved in the future. I think one of the big unknowns here is that, you know, DHCA is just beginning. We're in this first year of compliance. So how difficult it is to file these requests, how onerous is the paperwork, how likely are they to approve, or on what, you know, on what grounds, I think, you know, drive how valuable it is, you know, some of these avenues are. So there are a number of exemptions in the law, which some of which really impact HOC quite a bit. And I actually have another slide where I talk about how the exemptions affect HOC's property specifically. So I'm going to skip that, covering all the exemptions in the law that I have below here for now, and we'll come back to that in a minute.
At risk is the same as troubled, or at risk means it could lose affordability.
Yeah, so in the troubled properties section of the code, which is a separate law that predates rent stabilization, HOC does triennial inspections of all the multifamily housing in the county. Excuse me, DHCA. Thank you. That's a very important clarification. They classify all based on a quite complicated formula, all of those properties as troubled, at risk, or compliant. And if you're at risk or troubled, then you're subject now to this rent freeze. If you're compliant, then you're free. And so we do have some more information about how that potentially impacts HOC as well. Thank you. So next slide, please. So this is just a timeline of the law. I'm not going to go through each of these points, but you know, the last point I just want to point you to is that, you know, DHCA has published a notice of a 6% rent cap for FY25. And so we expect that going forward, they will publish the rent cap for each fiscal year in February along with the VRG. And then that will be effective from July 1 to June 30 each year. And so we'll have that information going into formulating our annual budget. Next slide, please. So this is our analysis of how the exemptions impact HOC's portfolio. We think that at least 73% of our units are exempt from the law. The two big exemptions that cover us are one, there's an exemption for any unit that has an affordability restriction, a federal, state, or local, and that could be law, agreement, or regulation. So that covers 67% of our portfolio. And then there's an exemption for any building built in the last 23 years. So for the first 23 years of a building's life, it's exempt from the rent stabilization law. That covers the buildings you see here, and obviously would also cover, our robust pipeline of new buildings that we're embarking on constructing. The other 27% of units are not automatically exempt, but they may qualify for other exemptions. The most significant is that there's an exemption for the first 23 years after a property has been substantially renovated. So similar to the new construction, major difference is that you have to apply for that exemption. You have to demonstrate your costs, and the standard that they have set in the law for substantially renovated is that the cost of the renovation exceed 40% of the assessed value of the property. Assessed value.
Value, not street value.
Assessed value.
Okay.
That's quite a bit higher, for example, than the federal standard, which is generally 15%, that the cost of construction exceed 15% of the assessed value. So that's, definitely a task that we are undertaking, is looking at our past renovations, and for those that are within the past 23 years, but you do need to develop quite a complex application. I think there is also some analysis to do about, frankly, whether we need the exemption versus, just agreeing to stay within those rent caps, the rules of the rent stabilization law. But certainly something we could take into account as we, do renovations in the future. We currently have 738 units that could be impacted temporarily by the troubled property restrictions, and you can see them here. These are properties that were marked as troubled or at risk following the inspection. One thing I want to highlight is that, this law was not designed with this consequence in mind, and the way it works is essentially, if you are, so they take all the properties that they inspect in a given year, and then they calculate an average for the violations, and they sort of create this violation score. And if you are below that average, then you are a troubled property, and if you're above it, then you're compliant. And so the result is you could never have a year that there's not going to be some troubled properties, and it's not a fixed level that you have to meet. So there's sort of
more slumlords that aren't HOC out there, the better it is for.
Ironically in a way,
Right.
And then it becomes also very dependent on, who your inspector was, because how many violations, did they count, the needs paint as 5 violations because there's 5 rooms that need paint, or is that 1 violation for the whole unit? I'll just say the DHA director has said in public forums that he's, interested in revisiting that, that program and potentially redesigning it to be a little clearer. And the other thing is that, while we feel that at least at many of these properties, we've already taken care of the violations that were noted, you can be re-inspected, but until they complete the inspections for that year and recalculate the score, you can't come off of your status won't change. And so it can be a bit lengthy and unpredictable getting on or off the list.
Where does our scattered site portfolio fit into this? Or is that all included in the 738?
So yeah, so the scatter site portfolio, I think at least not like 99% have some affordability restriction.
Oh, okay.
And so they are in the 6,146 affordable units. They're largely exempt. So why don't I pause and any questions about this? But I think the big takeaway is 73% exempt, 27% not exempt unless we apply for an exemption.
So do after year, I guess, starting year 24, does everyone kind of move into that not automatically exempt status? Is that what you said, Ken?
Yes, yeah. So for the market units at new buildings, once in year 24, they would no longer be exempt. That's correct. Right. Okay, next slide. Oh.
And projecting forward, like cider mill, which is a big preoccupation. If our rent is frozen or you get the exception, how do you look at it? How does the financing look, with compared to your expenses? If your rent is frozen without are we breaking even? We're losing money. You want to get back to me later? It's all right.
Yeah, cider mill, in terms of its operations, it definitely, due to the rent freeze and not being able to increase it, it's definitely impacted by it, and it requires quite a bit of capital investment. So it does not currently yet operate positive cash flow.
So if you went to I'm just trying to understand the mechanics. So if you went to them and said, look, you've got this capital program going, and you say to the county, we've got a capital program going, but I could use some revenue to pay for it.
Absolutely.
Is that on deaf ears? Is that you don't really know where you're heading because it's a discretionary process to some extent?
Yeah, to an extent. I think this will be one of those things that we'll have to find out as we go through the process of submitting for that exemption and see how that goes. But yes, that would be the plan for a property like cider mill in similar situations, to request that increase.
But if it was flat, if they didn't grant you the exception, we would be negative, do you think?
Currently, the way, but we are making a lot of improvements. So yes, in the near future, we won't be.
If they give you if you get out of trouble.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this slide, just to sort of highlight the impact, the major impact outside of the troubled properties is for that 27% that is not exempt. On renewal, if we, under HOC's current practice of sticking to the VRG, and then, adjusting rents upwards on turnover, we would no longer be able to fully mark to market. We would be able to do a 10% increase maximum based on our banking of rents.
So I'm sorry, so if cider mill gets it flat, they won't give you a rent increase, and the VRG is 3%. Or not the VRG, I'm sorry, the new formula. Is that 3% banked, or you don't get to bank it if you're at risk or troubled?
I have to get back to you. I don't know that.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
okay, it won't be long. So Ken, that means that landlords can go up on the rent. That means the landlords can go up on the rent since this policy has been in effect. And when did the policy go in effect?
July of this year.
Of this year, right? So say for instance, somebody is a vacant a place. He can still, can he make the rent higher?
Up to the maximum. So this year it would be
6%?
6%. So that would be the maximum increase
Okay,
that anyone can receive this year. unless the landlord has applied under one of those exceptions for a higher rent,
Okay,
a higher
I'm
increase.
sorry, there you go.
I just wanted to also be clear, like, this is not replacing, like, so for the units that we have that are restricted for VRG, those are still restricted for, like, that's still the maximum. It's not,
Correct.
Yeah.
And we have units that are covered by OCAF, by the federal standards. We have, there's LIHTC rents, there's a number, for the affordable restricted units, they're exempt from this law, but there's a web of other potential depending on the funding sources. And those obviously all still apply. And the effect is whatever is the most restrictive rule is the one that we would follow.
Got it.
You can go to the next slide, please. So what we've done here is, I really want to start by a big caveat of emphasizing what it says in the sort of top right corner, that what we did was try to create a hypothetical scenario just to show some of the possible differences of some of the different options for adjusting to this new law. But these are not revenue forecasts. They're not budget estimates. They don't take into account operational issues, just to sort of show them sort of kind of maximum variance that we could be looking at under these scenarios. And we have 3 scenarios here. So scenario 1 would be if you were to take the maximum under rent stabilization every year. And so we're assuming that's 6% every year. So if you just took a 6% increase every year, you can see there, that's how your rent would increase. And then that would be the revenue generated by that unit over 5 years, and then below that over 20 years. Scenario 2 would be under HOC's current practice, where you restrain rents to the VRG. And we're assuming that every year it's 2.6%. That's the 10-year average VRG for the last 10 years. But then in year 5, the unit turns over. So our average turnover across our portfolio is about 21%. So after 5 years, we assume, that unit has turned over. And in that year, you reset the rent with a higher increase to match, what we've sort of taken in scenario 1 to be the market rent.
So I presume that your average of 2.6%, you're thinking about your expenses, so you're not negative, of course, right?
Right. So that would assume we're bound, to follow the VRG.
Right, but you're choosing to do less because we have a different mission.
Right.
But you're taking into account your expense growth. Are some of the units, I presume, when you go to 13%, some of those units are naturally occurring affordable housing? And if we raised it 13%, do we lose that unit?
Well, it would really be a unit by unit basis.
I know.
Especially for the scatter sites, depending on where they're located.
Those are
But-
affordable.
Yeah, so, I mean, the rents, most of our properties were restricted by various AMI requirements and the relative rents related to it. So the affordability would still be preserved to an extent, because we don't necessarily go full market rate rent. So for example, if we have 80% AMI units, the maximum will increase those rents to, even if we were to mark them to market, would be the 80% of rents.
But if that unit, if the project's operating properly at 2.6%, you're more than covering your expenses. Unit turns over, it's a 80% person, leaves, you raise rent 13%. Presumably that has an effect on affordability for that unit,
Well,
conceptually.
yeah, conceptually, yes, but the
It's not
rent, like, it would still, if it's a 60% AMI, it would only be increased.
And I think
These
really what
are
we're
unrestricted, these are units without restrictions.
Yeah, and what we're thinking about is the units that are covered, that 27% that are covered. So these would be the
uncovered
market units
where you could go to market if you chose to. We have a
Right.
different mission.
But our practice, HOC's practice has been to, if
2.6.
it's a renewal, we restrain it to
I
the
got it.
VRG.
But when it turns over.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, and I think
our
these are all assumptions. So you could definitely, in this chart, you could definitely construct this differently with different.
I just think that's something to think about if we all are concerned about naturally occurring affordable housing and
Absolutely.
preservation. If the deal is working well to your satisfaction, physically and operationally. And in this hypothetical, I'm not saying you've raised rent anywhere, I get it. We could be losing or diminishing the impact of this affordable, naturally occurring affordable housing, right?
Absolutely. I think, we also,
Conceptually.
a lot of our properties, are sort of mixed income model where we're cross subsidizing, the affordability in other units, through the market units.
Is that true? You're taking some units and lowering the rent when they turn over?
You think about.
No,
Jump in here. Because
I don't want to
the-
get too lost. I know the
Absolutely,
time.
we're lost. Right now, I think what I wanted to make sure we do here is
we
really
understand.
provide you with the information that will allow you to make an informed decision on if we should maintain VRG, if we should adopt rent stabilization, or if we should consider this other approach, which is VRG plus rent banking. In terms of answering the more specific questions, I will just say that every property, and you actually are giving a wonderful prelude to our request. Our request is that we are allowed to present to the commission a recommendation per property related to where we should land in regards to rent increases. We follow VRG. We obviously continue to maintain scenarios in which our expenses even exceed the VRG guidelines. And so to balance our entire portfolio to make sure that we're able to be operational, we want an opportunity to look at each property to never exceed rent stabilization, because of course that's the threshold that the county has created. Even in circumstances where it doesn't apply to our portfolio, we want to, of course, abide by the overall sentiment related to rent increases. And so our recommendation is to not go above rent stabilization, but on an annual basis, when presenting each property budget, present to the commission our recommendation related to increases for that property. And that will allow us an opportunity to explore what makes sense based on where that property is located. Obviously, in places where there's naturally occurring affordable housing and you're doing your comparatives, you're comparing it to other naturally occurring affordable housing so that rent is also reflective there. You could only go but so far. So those are the various considerations that we will take into account when developing our budgets and our recommendations to the commission. So I might have gotten us to the next slide.
So
The next phase,
I appreciate that.
which is ultimately where we wanted to land and have an opportunity for discussion and dialogue around that recommendation.
So when you present the budget, what your plans are for what year?
Yes,
And hypothetically, you have a unit that turns over and there's an increase. We would have enough knowledge to know what income level that person is at today.
no, we will not have any capacity to go unit by unit and over to the
When
9,000.
you present a project to us,
Right,
there'll be units that will turn over.
right.
You'd have some sense of, are they affordable units, meaning the people who are living there are in those units that have now been vacated. And what you're presenting to us is how that rent would go up or not go up. Is that right?
We will be presenting our overall recommendation related to rent increases for the entire portfolio, but it is almost impossible. I don't know unless you have an algorithm to know,
I do.
okay, if someone's getting ready to leave, or if they're getting ready to vacate, or if this unit's going to turn over, or when it's going to turn over. And as we've shared in the materials, it's on a rolling basis that rent increases are applied. So you could only apply a rent increase for any individual once every year. So it really, there's no set way to determine what that ultimate impact would be, except for making sure that the commission is in alignment with regards to what is the highest amount that we will permit in terms of rent increases. That's different and apart from our philosophy around going to market when we can in circumstances in which we can. And that's a different discussion, and we can definitely explore that. That is how we have been able to maintain going to market, and our estimate, of course, reflects a 5-year estimate in terms of when a unit might turn. But as you all know, many people stay in our units for very long periods of time. So It's very seldom that if you're doing these incremental changes, that you even get to market. And so when you have an opportunity and the unit turns, there's an opportunity to explore what's the current reasonable market rate for that unit. Of course, our mandate in terms of percentage of units that must maintain a certain level of affordability is something that we apply and track for every unit in our portfolio. So if we have a property that we have already determined 20% of the units should maintain this AMI, we're maintaining that percentage for that percentage of that property. It's the units that are market rate that we're talking about in terms of the potential to take advantage of exploring what we can get in terms of market for those market rate units that are not under affordable restriction and that do not fall under rent stabilization. And that really is a small handful of units, quite frankly.
So as I understand the recommendation, we're putting an upper bound on, but nothing will happen automatically. We'll go on a case by case, property by property basis
Yes.
so we have
the recommendation is moving forward that we will present property budgets along with the recommendation related to the increase that we would recommend for that particular property. And that will allow us an opportunity to say, this property has the current restrictions, so our recommendation is to apply VRG. This property has higher expenditures, and although VRG was previously applied, our recommendation is to follow the rent stabilization and not go higher than that. That's the analysis that we'd like to take and the level of attention that we'd like to
so it's sort of
put into.
maximum flexibility within a upper bound.
Yes.
And just so I understand, I mean, even with that sort of upper bound, if we would still be able to do rent banking with that, or that does not
Yes.
preclude rent banking still,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I mean, that would sort of within that, we would, as always, have to comply with
Right.
rent stabilization and all the laws and rent banking.
So
I
wouldn't,
think we
I
would
mean,
do
so
either way.
with the rent banking, I mean, so, the upper bound on an annual basis for a property that would be 6%, except in cases where rent banking might apply, in which case for that unit, it would be 10%.
Right, and there may be a property where, we feel like this, as you said, this property is operating really well, and we're okay with sticking with the VRG to,
right,
reduce the impact. There may be a property where.
Yeah, no, so that's the upper bound. It's not saying that's what we will do.
Right,
Correct.
Right.
exactly. And then it gives the commission the opportunity to weigh in, year by year and property by property.
Very quickly to answer the question of preserving affordability for our market rate units, which are the non-exempt ones largely, we use FMRs as the baseline for setting those rents, which are slightly below the area median rents anyways. So we do preserve the affordability by using the FMRs even for our market rate units. We do adjust them slightly where needed based on the condition of the unit. So we do, ensure or do our best to ensure that the affordability is always preserved, even for the units that are exempt.
And I wanted to share with respect to rental rate increases, even those properties that are on the DHCA list, HOC is very proactive with respect to that list. And HOC maintenance is on top of it, responding and reporting and asking for DHCA to be responsive to our request when we complete all of the work that's they have requested us to accomplish.
So it says in here what you're requesting is you're recommending an increase level for each property in the annual budget that's consistent with all applicable laws, regulations, and agreements and subject to commission's review and approval. So that's not a matter of tying us to either the rent stabilization or VRG. It gives us a flexibility to determine which one is the most appropriate for a specific project.
Yeah.
Project by project.
Project by project.
Yeah.
And we'll have enough information
Exactly.
without going into too much detail.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. With that understanding of that, clearly, is the commission willing to move forward and pass a resolution to adopt that? Is there a resolution present for us to be able to do that with?
Yes, it's in your packet today. It's number 2416.
2469.
Yes.
So based on this discussion, is the commission, do you all feel amply informed enough to be able to make and support the recommendation that was set forth to us?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have that
Yes.
upper bound and provide the flexibility within it. So I would,
And if we get enough project by project information without giving us the whole profit and loss statement, it makes total sense. And I'm only asking questions just because the 13% jumped out at me. But I appreciate this information. This has really been education.
Okay, you making a motion?
so moved.
Got a second?
I second.
Been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-69. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next item coming before us deals with, in fact, the calendar year 23 audits for our LIHTC properties. These are required audits that have to be done in compliance.
Thank you. Commissioners, this is a standard matter that comes before the commission on an annual basis. This relates to our LIHTC properties and our LLCs that are on an annual audit, a calendar audit timeline. I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Tim Getzinger, to provide additional details.
Thanks, President Andrews, Commissioners. For the record, Tim Getzinger, CFO and Senior VP of Finance. This item is a continuation of the item that came before you on June 5th, 2024. Essentially, there are 21 properties that we have that require a calendar year audit. 2 of those are in pre-development. So in calendar year 23, 19 were due. During the June 5th meeting, 16 of those property audits were completed. They all received an unmodified standard clean audit. There were 3 left that needed to be approved by the investor. They were actually approved in July, right around when the July meeting was. I didn't want to squeeze it into the July meeting, so we postponed it to now. Those 3 included HOC at Willow Manor LLC, Spring Garden 1 Associates LP, as well as HOC at Westside Shady Grove LLC. They all received clean audits as well. And so before you is a recommendation to approve those 3 audits.
So you ask us to approve all 3 or just 2? Because it says 2. That recommended to the commission.
There are 2 low-income housing tax credit partnership audits. That's for HOC at Willow Manor and Spring Garden 1 Associates. And then there is a 3rd one, which is HOC at Westside Shady Grove LLC.
I would make a motion to approve the audits and congratulate you on the unqualified opinions.
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-70. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the order, so carried unanimously. Thank you. Can I get a motion to recess the meeting in order to convene the Development Corporation meetings?
So moved.
Is there a second? All
Second.
in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We will now convene the Development Corporation meetings that are listed on the agenda. The Development Corporations are entities that are wholly controlled by HOC and own various properties. For each Development Corporation, the Board of Directors is comprised of HOC commissioners, and the officers are the same as the officers of the commission. On July the 10th, 2024, 3 Development Corporations met to approve various matters. The meetings convened today are for the purpose of approving the minutes from those meetings. I now call the meeting of the Metropolitan Development Corporation to order. Is there a second to approve the minutes from July the 10th, 2024?
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay, so ordered. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I now call the meeting of the RAD 6 Development Corporation to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from July the 10th, 2024? Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So carried. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I now call the meeting of the Wheaton Metro Development Corporation to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from July the 10th, 2024?
So moved.
Seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. This concludes the Development Corporation meetings. We now reconvene our regular HOC monthly meeting. Pursuant to section 3-305B and D of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, I move to adopt the written closing statement dated September the 11th, 2024, and to adjourn this open session to a closed session to discuss 5 topics. The first topic is the potential acquisition of real property located in Silver Spring. The second and third topics are about the potential acquisition and financing of the real property located in Bethesda. The fourth topic is about PNC's bank provisions of various lines of credit to HOC. And the fifth topic is to discuss ongoing litigation impacting Westwood Towers apartment. The sixth topic is to discuss legal advice related to compliance with state loan documents on various HOC properties and related financial information. The first, second, and third topics are being discussed in closed session in order to protect HOC's bargaining power and to protect confidential commercial and financial terms about the transactions. The statutory sections that allow this discussion to be closed are sections 3-305B3 and B13. The fourth topic is being discussed in closed session to protect confidential commercial and financial information provided to HOC from PNC Bank in connection with its provision of various lines of credit to HOC. The statutory exception that allows this topic to be discussed is in closed session in section 3-305B13. The fifth topic is being discussed in closed session in order to protect HOC's attorney-client privilege and to protect HOC's interests in the ongoing litigation. The statutory exception that allows this discussion to be closed are section 3-305B7, B8, and B13. The sixth topic is being discussed in closed session to obtain legal advice and to protect confidential commercial and financial terms. The statutory section that allows this discussion to be closed are sections 3-305B7 and B13. If a member of the public is watching this meeting in real time on the YouTube, wishes to object to the closed meeting, please comment in the YouTube chat box or contact HOC's General Counsel. Instructions can be found in the Open Meetings Act objection procedures, which is posted on HOC's website. Do I have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The regular meeting is now closed, and we will now convene in closed session. Thank you.